Sorry everybody, it's Xilicks here, and welcome back to week 4 of the Elysian Draft League Power Rankings. As always, I'm going to be ranking the teams in order from least to greatest. Keep in mind that these rankings do take the previous weeks into account, so it's not just this current week, and they always will. And yeah, this is just my personal opinion, so if you agree or disagree, just, it doesn't really matter, it's just an opinion. So yeah, let's get right into it with our number 16 team. Coming in at number 16, we have Zen and the Miami Mawwiles. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the only team that has not gotten a win yet, and Zen did end up forfeiting this match. I believe it was 4-2 was the final score, after a setup superior ripped through his entire team. While the full paralysis on the Sawsbuck was very unfortunate, as he could have killed the superior and then maybe potentially either won the match or definitely would have had a better differential. He did misplay a little bit by going into Mawwile before the Arcanine, as obviously Erasmus was able to play around the Sucker Punch by going for a substitute. Had he E-speeded, I don't know the exact calc, but it would have either knocked out the superior or put him in a range where he could not go for a substitute, and then the Mawwile would either be able to kill it with a Sucker Punch or Erasmus would be able to switch out. Either way though, he did misplay by going into the Mawwile before the Arcanine for that reason. Also, at that point though, the match was still heavily out of his favor due to the full paralysis onto the Sawsbuck. So again, had he played that differently, it most likely would have just been differential at that point. He probably wouldn't have been able to win. Again, I don't know his exact sets, so maybe he could have pulled something off. But yeah, while I don't respect speed passing as a strategy, I have even less respect for forfeiting, as it makes it really hard to track things like the kill-death ratio. Keep in mind that at the end, the Leaf Storm could have potentially missed the Starmie, and the Starmie could have knocked it out with an Ice Beam, or whatever, at that point. And, obviously, it's really unlikely that he misses the Leaf Storm right there. But again, like, the differential could have been different, and that could have mattered, Like Zen, if you're listening, you should have just played out the 2 turns, maybe 3 turns if he missed. But yeah, it makes it really difficult to calculate kill death, and you either robbed your Starmie and yourself of 1 differential, or you robbed Erasmus of potential 2 kills with the superior. So yeah, anyone who's listening, try not to forfeit, guys. I know it can be frustrating, especially in a match like this, but Next up, in the number 15 position, we have the Tampa Bay Rayquaza. Now, Demonic did drop out of the league. I don't know if it was personal reasons or whatever, but for whatever reason, Demonic is no longer the coach of the Tampa Bay Rayquaza, and Roggen Boggin has taken his place. So, he did win this first week. It was a very narrow 1-0, and it may have come down to hacks. I don't really know what would have happened if the E-Speed didn't crit. Because I don't know if the Gallade had any priority. That being said, both coaches seemed to agree that the crit mattered, so I'm just going to go with that and say the crit did matter. However, if the crit didn't happen, he would have lost, but instead of it being 1-0 in his favor, it would have been 1-0 in Jack's favor. He did play Jack this week. Now, either way, he would be in the same position now, regardless of that crit. That goes for both coaches, as you'll see later on. But yeah, one thing I want to say about this team is he definitely built better than how Demonic was building, so hopefully we'll be able to see him pick up some wins. And I know he did make some trades, or well, a trade, or ad drop, whatever, in the next upcoming week that was not active during this week. However, it will be active in the next week, so we may see this team pick up some more wins as the season progresses, but where it stands now, I'm still having him at the number 15 position just because of the previous weeks. In the number 14 spot, we have Riolu and the Toronto Mucks. Now, again, this team, I feel, needs some serious changes. You need to get some defensive mons in there. Riolu lost 3-0 versus Cubos, and as said, he still needs to make some changes because what happened in this matchup was Cubos, he set up a Amistar, got a bunch of kills, and Scarf Thunderous got a bunch of kills through Psychic and whatnot, and like he continues to just leave mons in against offensive threats and just let them go down. There was an instance a couple times where he sacked off a Mon where he could have gone into the Shuckle and allowed for the Shuckle to take the hit instead, you know, when potentially forcing a switch out or wearing it down with like infestation stalling. Also, Riolu has access to, I believe, 2 Encore users, maybe more, and he's not using it whenever he goes up against these teams that have potential setup. Had he put on a little bit more offensive pressure with Beedrill this match, we may have seen it come down a little bit closer. However, the Scarf Thunderous really didn't have any resists past a certain point in the battle, and I'm pretty sure it would have been either a 2-0 or a 1-0 still in Cubchu's favor had the Mux played a little bit differently. But yeah, make some team changes, maybe play a little differently, build a little differently, you might see some wins. In the number 13 spot, we have Haunter and the South London Sylveons. Now, before we get into the match, I do want to talk about the transaction that Haunter made. Haunter dropped the Tapu Fini that Kraft originally drafted and picked up Volcanion. Now, I personally don't really agree with this move, as I'm more of a fan of Fini on this team compared to the Volcanion. That being said, though, if Haunter feels that Volcanion fits his playstyle better or works better for him, then it'll definitely be the better option in the long run, as, again, he didn't originally draft the team, so whatever changes he ends up making to make the team better suit his playstyle and his wants, then the better he'll probably do for the rest of the season. That being said, in this matchup though, he did have a pretty harsh loss to Zach. However, he did put up quite a good fight. Even though it was a 5-0 loss out of his favor, he definitely got a lot of Zach's Mons very, very low, and Jolteon was just a huge part of this match. I'm pretty sure he knew that going into the match. Bolt Beam really does tear through Zach's team. The only issue, though, is Zach has so much defense that one Bolt Beam user just isn't enough. If we lived in a hypothetical world where he had 2 Jolteons, he probably would have won this match. That being said, Zach was able to keep his Mons up versus the Sylveons and eventually wear down the Sylveons team to the point where the Zygarde 10% could just clean up the match, and there wasn't much that Haunter could do to the Zygarde as it had the priority, and you know, it's just wasn't really much he could do. I did like his sets, and I would have liked to see maybe a little bit more aggressive playing with Jolteon. I think there were a couple 50-50s in the match with Jolteon where he could have either Volt Switched, Thunderbolt, maybe even HP Ice. And I think he HP Iced one turn into the Heatran, where had he not done that, maybe it would have been a little bit different. But, you know, 50-50s, there's not much you can do about it. It's really just mind games at that point. So I did think he played very well, but he is still so low due to his past weeks, and obviously this week taking a big loss did not help, as he has gone down a couple rankings. In the number 12 position, we have Agron in the Cork City Cyndaquils. Now, again, before we get into the match, he did make a transaction. He dropped his Komodo and picked up the Goodra. I really do like this transaction, as Agron has quite a lot of offense on his team with the Koko, the Salazzle, the Heracross, the Floatzel, the Aerodactyl, the Weavile. So adding a more defensive Mon in trade of like a potential setup Mon, I think is pretty good, just because Goodra can take special hits very, very well. It has some interesting utility options, and it's able to put out reliable damage as well. I know that this thing gets quite a wide variety of coverage moves, from things like Power Whip to Sludge Bomb, so there's really not a lot of Mons that can kind of get, or there's not a lot of things that wall Goodra, I should say. Obviously, he does have to worry about physical attackers, but he is able to pivot around with the rest of his team to be able to deal with them. Now, moving on into his match, he did lose versus Swagzyre. Definitely should have packed Toxic on some more Mons to be able to deal with that Mega Slowbro. I don't know how his team was built. I don't know if he did have Toxic on certain Mons and just never got the chance to use it. But we did see in the Cradily versus Slowbro matchup that the Cradily just got Toxic stalled, and it really just allowed the Slowbro to sit on the field for a very long amount of time. Now, I understand that the Cradily set probably didn't have enough room for Toxic, but it ended up hurting him more than it helped, as the Slowbro was able just to Toxic stall it down and eventually win the game with its immense bulk and recovery. Now, Again, as I said before, I don't know his sets, so he could have been packing Toxic on some other mons, but we do know that it's one of the most reliable ways, if not the most reliable way of killing the Slowbro, as well as the Tapu Koko he had, which he did risk versus the Garchomp. It made a little bit of a misprediction. I imagine he predicted the Garchomp to go for the Dragon move, so he would go into his Fairy type, but as we saw in the matchup, the Garchomp did not go for the Dragon move and took out the Tapu Koko. So he kind of did lose his ways to deal with the Slowbro, which eventually ended up in the Slowbro winning the match. In the number 11 spot, we have the Murkrows and Joey. Now, Joey did drop a little bit of rankings this week, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember what it was last week, but this drop, he dropped so much due to some of the other battles. It's not that he played like immensely horribly this match. It's just that some of the other battles I ranked a bit higher than him, and this is kind of the position that fell down to him. Before we get in the matchup though, again, we have another team that made a transaction. He dropped his Mantine and picked up Gengar. Now, while he does lose a pretty bulky special wall, a hazard removal, and a ground immunity, he does gain a pretty fast, versatile special attacker, and I think that Mantine was a bit redundant. As I've said before, he has another water type that can also hazard remove, and he also has special walls with things like the Registeel, the Aromatisse, so he didn't really need another one. Gengar also adds to his already impressive speed, where he has the Victini at 100, the Lottie at 110, the Pinsir with its priority, you know, you have the Galvantula, which is pretty speedy, and then the Gengar, which I also believe is at 110. So he definitely has some very fast, hard-hitting offense that teams have to worry about. However, in this matchup, Doric's defense was able to sit on the field longer than Joey's defense was, with things like the Rest Mudsdale, knockoff on the Armaldo, ridding the leftovers of certain mons like the Registeel, a very bulky Celesteela that was able to threaten some of Joey's defensive mons. Once the rocks were up on Joey's side of the field in the late game, his demise was pretty much spelled out for him. He did slightly misplay by going for the V-Create instead of the Bolt Strike versus the Celesteela, although I imagine that he still would have lost, but potentially would have had a better differential, as the rocks on his side did limit his switch-ins between the Victini and the Pinsir at that point in the match, as obviously both of those mons are very weak to Stealth Rocks. In the number 10 position, we have Farouk and the Pittsburgh Pangoras. Now, despite having a very big loss this week, he did not drop as many rankings because obviously that big loss was determined by some pretty crucial hacks. So he did lose to the Yodeler 5-0 because the Haxorus set up to +1/+1. On the turn, the Haxorus went for the Dragon Dance. The Bronzong on Farouk's side went for the Gyro Ball, dealing around 51%, bringing the Haxorus to somewhere in the 40s, as he did take, I believe, Stealth Rock damage before coming in. It's impossible to say who would have won had the crit not happened, because the Haxorus was able to OHKO the Bronzong with a critical Earthquake due to the Mold Breaker ability. Keep in mind that this Bronzong was max health, max physical defense, and the calc normally would have done around 70 to 80. The Bronzong was also carrying the leftovers, so by the end of the turn it would have knocked out the Haxorus, and after the leftovers recovery would have been sitting in probably the 40-ish% range. Had that happened, it would have been 4-4. Farouk would have had 4 mons, Yodeler would have had 4 mons, and while yes, Yodeler did have something that can take 1 hit from the Battle Bond Greninja, he did not have anything that could take 2, and he only had 1 mon that could take 1 hit. So essentially what the rest of the match would have been is Greninja would have came to the field and it would have knocked something out. Then he would have gone into the Shaman, scared out the Greninja. Farouk did have 2 potential switch-ins to the Shaman, being a Bronzong and a Charizard, both of which resist grass moves heavily. And he's not free to click Earth Power, because if he Earth Powers predicting the Zard and he goes Bronzong, then the Bronzong gets more leftovers. If he goes for an HP Fire predicting the Bronzong and he goes into the Zard, then the Zard quad resists it, and if he goes for a grass move. Basically, the point that I'm trying to say here is while Yodeler believes that he had not a surefire way of winning, but he feels it was more in his favor, I'd honestly disagree. I think that this battle was more in Freak's favor, as he did have a Scarf Metacam with an Ice Punch. He had a Zard that outsped the Shaman because he was not running speed, and the Zard obviously OHKOs a Shaman. I mean, at that point in the match, I think Freak's offense wins, maybe 1-0, maybe 2-0. Again, Yodor still could have won the match. The crit is not the only reason why he won. He still could have, because obviously, you know, the Shaman does take an Ice Beam from the Greninja. But again, he has things that can switch into the Shaman. I don't know what moves it was running. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I think Farouk most likely would have won this match without the crit. Again, it's impossible to know, but it definitely did not help his differential, losing 5-0 compared to what probably would have been a 1 or 2-0 in either team's favor. In the 9th spot, we have Doric and the Kentucky Fried Combuskin. Doric did make another transaction this week. He dropped his Rabombi for the Lantern. I'm a huge fan of this trade because while he does already have a bulky water type being Almamoa is very, very, very passive. While the Lantern is able to Volt Switch, it can Heal Bell, there's quite a few things that Lantern can do. It can pass statuses, obviously it can go for a Scald that does a bit more damage than what would be coming off from an Almamoa. It's able to 1v1 a lot of bulky waters, and it's just a better Mon than what Rabombi would have been. It gives him another option, because one of my gripes with this team originally is he was kind of bottlenecked into the same Mons, and I didn't think that, you know, certain Mons on his team would be seeing a lot of use. 2 of those were the Alolan Golem and the Rabombi, and seeing him get rid of one, and I still think that he should probably get rid of the Alolan Golem in future weeks, but that's just a personal opinion. Seeing him get rid of one of them, though, is definitely a good thing. Now, he did win, as said before, against Joey. Once rocks were up at the end of the game, it was basically over. The differential could have been cleaned up a little bit on Joey's end, but I think Doric still had the match, even if Joey made a few different plays at the end. He was able to take down some of Joey's potential offensive threats early, like the Latios went down kind of early game, the Gengar got OHKO'd by the Mudsdale, and we saw a lot of his defensive walls, like the Registeel, get its leftovers knocked, and really just the Mudsdale was able to sit there and heal up health and be pretty annoying while wearing down things like the War Turtle. It really just showed that Doric's defense was able to outshine Joey's this week, and yeah, he cleaned up the game with a well-preserved Darmanitan, so good job all around in that match. In the number 8 spot, despite seeing a fair amount of improvement, we have the Chicago Cubchus. Now, before we get into the matchup, as we did already talk about it a little bit on Farouk's ranking, I'm going to talk about the transaction he made. He did drop his Umbreon and picked up Mandibuzz. Again, another really good move in my opinion. Mandibuzz is arguably a better defensive dark type as it has more utility options, has removal, whatnot. And it can come in handy week to week as it kind of frees up the Rapid Spin slot on Excadrill if he doesn't want to run Rapid Spin. And while he also had another Rapid Spinner with Hitmonchan, Hitmonchan isn't a Mon that you want to bring every week, so having a defensive Mon that can get rid of those hazards is a thumbs up from me. Now, he did win this matchup 5-0 with a very devastating crit on the Bronzong. Again, I said before, this crit mattered quite a lot, and after the crit, the Water Shuriken wasn't able to take out the Haxorus because of a roll. The roll was in Yodor's favor, but had Farouk gotten the roll on the Water Shuriken, he definitely would have been able to clean up the differential by a bit, although I think at that point Yodor still would have won, whereas if the crit didn't happen, I think Farouk probably would have won. Again, it's impossible to know, it's Pokemon, this is how things go, but yeah, it was revealed after the match. Bronzong was max defense, so the crit definitely mattered, and it would have been a 4-4, so yeah, there's no Gren switch-ins at that point, other than the Shaman, which isn't a switch-in, but a revenge kill option. So, you know, all around, the match was unfortunate because of the crit. Yodor can't do anything to control that, but the reason why he isn't higher than what he probably should be is because of that crit. I can't really know how the match would have gone, and based on his past weeks, it is holding him down a little bit, but he has gone up quite a few spots from where he's been in the past. In the number 7 spot, we have Swagzire and the Green Bay Sandslashers. Now, he was able to beat Agron 3-0, as said before, once he toxic the Cursing Cradily. That was a lot of alliteration. Whatever. Okay. He was pretty much in a solid position to win with Slowbro, as it was revealed that the Cradily was not holding the Toxic. Slowbro could easily switch into it and just sit there as the Cradily was getting worn down. Otherwise, the Cradily could have been very threatening to the Sandslashers team. He probably balanced his offense and defense this week to be able to win. While yes, the Aerodactyl did miss a Stone Edge on the Entei, which kind of sucked, allowing the Entei to be able to do more damage to the Aerodactyl, which would have been done otherwise. The Slowbro was able just to kind of sit there, and I don't think that the Aerodactyl would have done much to the Slowbro, as Slowbro has that immense physical defense stat, and there's no way he can crit it with a Stone Edge, so, you know. I think Swagzire played pretty well this match. Obviously, I think the loss was more credited to maybe Agron's team building not being as sharp as it could have been. Again, I don't know the exact team build, so I could be wrong. But from the looks of it, I think had Agron played a little bit better with the Coco and maybe packed Toxic on some more mons, I think it could have been Agron's match. But that being said, Swagzire played very well for what the match turned out to be, and he was able to pick up a pretty solid win. In the number 6 spot, I have myself. I did lose 3-0, not a huge loss, but it was a loss, which did bring me down a bit. I really needed to act more on my predictions this match. I didn't have the best team matchup this time, so I did decently well, I feel, for what the matchup was. I think that, obviously, Infinite has a better team than what I have. Had I acted more on my predictions, because I said during my commentary this match, a lot of the time I predicted him to do exactly what he did, but I then ended up over-predicting or under-predicting, thinking that he wouldn't do it. For example, there was one turn where I was going to Heatwave the incoming Scizor, but then I decided not to for whatever reason, even though Heatwave was 100% the play there. And there was another time where early on in the match, I predicted him to go into Seismitoad, and I clicked Volt Switch, even though I was considering hard switching straight into Venusaur. Had I done that, my team would have been way healthier, and I would have threatened him out, probably keeping rocks off of my side of the field early on. The Salamence was able to set up and do quite a bit of damage, and obviously my only way of killing it was with sacking the Donphan and then finishing it off with the Swallow. It was a bit unfortunate that the match came down to the way it did, but I feel that despite not making the right predictions, I think I played pretty well, even though it was a loss. In the number 5 spot, we have the Springfield Spoinks, coached by Cubju. He played Riolu this week and was able to set up with Amistar and cleaned up with the Scarf Thunderous. Not much else to really say about this battle other than Riolu didn't even seemingly try to play around the offense that was brought by the Spoinks. I mean, he kind of just sat in multiple turns and let things go down to the Scarf Thunderous, which I don't agree with those plays, but Cubju did what he needed to do. He got a pretty solid win, and he's in the number 5 spot this week. In the number 4 spot, we have Erasmus. Before we get into the matchup, Erasmus did drop his Typhlosion and picked up Emboar. Huge thumbs up from me. Emboar's a way better mon for his team. He regains that fighting stab that he lost by dropping Breloom, as well as he gets a really threatening mon that if it gets speed passed to it, it kind of just gets killed. Not many things can switch into this monster. Most people's way of killing it revolves around outspeeding it, and if you're unable to outspeed it with a speed pass, this thing is taking lives. Now, Erasmus was able to defeat Zen this week. There was a little bit of hacks that obviously did matter. I think it only really mattered towards differential. I don't think that Zen would have won the match had the hacks not happened. But again, Zen forfeited, so it's hard to know exactly what the exact differential would have been by the end of the match, because again, Superior could have missed the Leaf Storm. The full para, again, very unfortunate, as it allowed for the Superior to live and sweep the rest of the team. But yeah, Other than that, I mean, we've seen Erasmus win every single time he brings Speed Pass. His only loss, he either didn't bring it or didn't use it. I don't remember which. But yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a scummy strategy, but you know, he's doing it. He's making it work. He's getting wins. So you know, good on him. In the number 3 position, we have Jack in the LA Galvantulas. As said before, the crit at the end did matter potentially. Again, I don't really know, but the coaches said it did, so I'm just going to go with that. Regardless, though, the game would have been a 1-0 either way, and making it a not very outstanding win for Jack or loss. So he would basically be at number 3 regardless of if he won or lost that match 1-0. Just because of who the number 2 position and obviously the number 1 position are. So this is where he ended up being. I do think he played relatively well, but he didn't really put himself in a position to win because he did predict that the Volcarona was going to have the HP Ice. Obviously, as we saw in the match, it didn't, and he expected that it did, and he thought he lost 3-0. So yeah, had the Volcarona had the HP Ice, then he would have lost 3-0, and he did know that, which is why I do have him a little bit lower, because he wasn't really playing the way he should have to win if it did have the HP Ice. Again, I'm really running this into a dead horse, but yeah, that's really why he's here. He's had a match or two in the past where his differential hasn't been that great alongside this match, so that's why he's in the number 3 position. In the number 2 spot, we have Infinite in the Chicago Chandeliers. He won 3-0, making pretty safe plays throughout. Obviously, he did play me, and as I said during my discussion, I didn't really act on a lot of the predictions, which allowed him to play very safely. He was able to set up the Salamence and do quite a bit of damage to my team, as well as, you know, hitting things hard with the Mamoswine and whatnot. He had solid enough team building to wear down my team and survive from whatever offense I did bring. So props to him. Again, I do feel he had a pretty strong team matchup this week. So him winning is pretty expected, and he is back in the number 2 position. Coming in at number 1, to no surprise, we have Zach in the Kentucky Torcats. He got a 5-0 win versus Hunter, although this match, despite being 5-0, was very close. That Jolteon had plenty of opportunities to either knock out some mons or wear them down. His team was looking on its last legs, but he was able to wear down Hunter's team in time for the Zygarde to be able to clean up the match. Yeah, very interesting matchup here. We've seen Zach get quite a lot of wins, although I do think that we might start seeing some losses on his side, just because I think his early season schedule has been, you know, pretty easygoing, but in these next upcoming weeks, he's going to start facing a lot of teams that are in the top 10 as far as placings and rankings go. So we'll definitely see where he ends up after facing some teams that have also gotten quite a few wins. Obviously, you know, he's a very solid team, and I'm not suggesting that he's going to lose, but I'm definitely guaranteeing that he's going to have some closer matches coming up towards the end of this season, and I'm sure we're all excited to see how it goes. Alright, that is going to wrap up the Week 4 Power Rankings. Again, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with anything, or maybe give me some insight on some of your team building. You guys know the drill. I'll see you guys next time. Okay, thanks, bye.